This is the monk, or the mule, of the three-mule journey. This gentleman to my left is Todd Cardiff. He's a lawyer who has volunteered his pro bono service to represent us in our suit against the state and its enforcement agency, CHP, when we were what we perceived to be illegally and unlawfully arrested on January 23rd, 2020. And Todd's going to explain and talk about the case and his goal, what he wants to achieve, bringing this case into the court and making its way through the court. Todd?
Yeah, okay, so we brought what's called a Section 1983 case against the California Highway Patrol and David Agredano, who was the CHP officer that arrested the mule, or John Sears, by Paso Robles up in San Luis Obispo County. He was arrested on Lake Nacimiento Drive, and this is an area that is very hilly. It has a drop off on one side and hill on the other, and the order from the CHP was simply to stay off the road. The problem with such order is, one, it was impossible to comply with, and secondly, John Sears and his mules have a right to be on the public thoroughfares and highways. Pursuant to Vehicle Code Section 21050, it says that anyone riding or driving an animal has a right to use the lanes and has all the responsibilities and rights of anybody else using the roads. So such order was a violation of John's rights. The other thing that we're seeking is what's called a judicial declaration that John does have the right to use these public thoroughfares, and this would be on behalf of not just John, but to everybody who owns a horse or livestock and needs to use the public thoroughfares so that they can travel from point A to point B just like everybody else. And in fact, the area where John was arrested back on January 23rd of 2020 was an area where Mr. Sears would only have, the only other choice would be to be on the freeway, Highway 101. You know, if he does not have the right to legally travel on this road, then he simply doesn't have the legal right to travel, and that would be in violation of the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And liberty is part of freedom, and the U.S. Supreme Court and the California courts have determined that the right to travel is part of our liberty interest. You know, this is an opportunity to realize that the vehicle code also states that motor vehicles must slow down or stop until they can pass safely. And that's under Vehicle Code 21759. And the people that did call in and claim that John Sears was a safety hazard, they were simply traveling too fast and need to slow down and recognize that John is participating in a mode of travel that is been around since time immemorial. Did you want to say something about that?
If you watch the video CHP took when he was in his cruiser, if you watch it, he is demonstrating how to obey the law, whether he realized it or not. We were coming down, and myself and the mules were walking down the road. He came to a complete stop. He slowed down and then came to a complete stop, which allowed him to be safe, and the mules and myself to walk by him safely at no threat to either one of us or anybody else close by. And then when we got past each other, he went and proceeded forward. And he demonstrated the way the motorist is required by law to react when they approach an equestrian. And so the motorists that are complaining about our presence on the road admit to disobeying the law by complaining. To complain that we're dangerous when we move at 2 and 3 miles an hour, and they're not when they're moving at a speed that's far beyond anything somebody could consider safe for the situation they're complaining about, is unlawful. They approach us, they don't slow down or stop. If they do slow down, it's not anywhere near enough, and then they are forced to swerve out into the opposing lane of traffic to get by us in a somewhat safe condition, and they're disobeying the law. They have a choice to obey the law, like the CHP officer did, or disobey the law, as they all more often do, and they make that choice. We don't force them to make the choice, they make it. And that's what I got to say about that. And then we made a sign on a computer, a big sign that says, "Share the road, it's the law." And it shows the different icons, the motorist, the equestrian, the pedestrian, the cyclist. And if those signs were placed on the state roads, highways, every 3 miles or so, it would eventually bring the public mind around to understanding that yes, these roads are public thoroughfares. They always have been, and all legal users have a right to travel safely on them. They are not exclusively for a high-speed, heavy machine carrying somebody whose only interest is to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. Damn the consequences. These signs placed on all public roads would bring the public mind around to this understanding. The state is negligent. It hasn't done any of this. It's allowed the public mind to go where it is today. A motorist sees an equestrian on the side of the road, and the immediate reaction is, "What is he doing on my road? You better get off and get out of my way. How dare you slow me down?" They call the CHP. The CHP comes out and enforces their demands, which are totally and completely illegal, and that's why I was arrested. I was arrested using those demands as justification for the arrest.
So one of the things that we're seeking to do in this, by filing this lawsuit, is to ensure that John Sears and his mules don't have to interact with law enforcement constantly. We're hoping to gain a judicial declaration that states that all the equestrians and people who are driving livestock on the public thoroughfares have a right to be there and have a right to travel unmolested by law enforcement. So what I hope to do is to gain a judgment, to have that judgment be in a form that can be printed out, can be laminated, to be provided to John Sears and anybody else who wants to and does use a similar mode of travel, and they can present this judicial declaration to law enforcement that stopped them and have an imperfect understanding of the law. This doesn't mean that every law enforcement officer that John Sears meets is hostile to his way of life. There's plenty of police officers that are simply curious or helpful and will help him get from point A to point B in a safe manner. But but there's sufficient number of them that are want to engage in a debate on whether John Sears has the right to travel on a road. And I want to give John Sears the tools to be like everybody else, that if they're not breaking the law and they choose not to speak to law enforcement, they can walk away and say good day, sir, and wave goodbye. One thing that I wanted to point out that I feel is very ironic in this case is that John Sears was traveling at the time on the Juan Bautista de Anza historic trail, which was traveled by Juan Bautista de Anza in the 1700s, a trail that stretches all the way from Nogales, Mexico, near the Texas border, up to San Francisco. And so here was John traveling in basically the same manner that Juan Bautista was traveling, yet he was arrested. And I just find that a very interesting fact, and very, very ironic that you were not able to travel you weren't permitted to travel the same trail, despite the fact that it was a historically designated trail.
Yeah, I just want to make the point, stamp it down, that these roads are public thoroughfares, and that means the public has the right to use it. And equestrians, bicyclists, somebody walking, somebody riding a wheelchair, somebody on a skateboard, they're all come under the category of legal users and have rights to the public thoroughfare. And the motorist, the public thoroughfare does not belong to the motorist. They're only one of the legal users. And because they have the machine, the heavy machine, that travels at excessive speed, the responsibility rests on their shoulders to be very aware of the laws. They don't have the right to disobey the law, because when they do, it's a bloody mess for everybody around them. And yep, and we witness it, one motor vehicle after the next all day long, and it's got to change. And the motorist is going to have to change their attitude, because the equestrian is not going to leave the face of the earth. The public thoroughfare is what's left. Everything else is private. If you step on private property, you're going to be arrested or run off. The public thoroughfare is what's left, and the mules have no intention of being run off the face of the earth. We've been here too long, hundreds of thousands of years, and we intend to be here for hundreds of thousands of years more. And we're going to keep our place in the public thoroughfare. And that's the purpose for us bringing this lawsuit. It goes far beyond any details, legal details or technicalities. It is our way of life, moving and traveling on this earth. And it's sacred, and we're not going to lose it.
So basically what you're saying is that it goes beyond a personal grievance. This lawsuit is intended to vindicate the public's right to travel these public thoroughfares in a manner of their choosing.
Yes, sir.